The video that you're about to watch is an excerpt from a live webinar. If you enjoy the contents of this video, please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your comments. Thanks for watching. As little children, the motivation for settling into a particular personality quality is kind of like the central quality of how we know ourselves. Comes from the desire to, like, a survival instinct in the individual, that as little children, life isn't always that easy, and children have various coping mechanisms, and what they'll often do is they'll lean into their most effective coping mechanism and use the qualities associated with that most effective coping mechanism as the foundation for their sense of self, their inner, original, most like home-based sense of self. And so his point is that for those of us who formed our home base, and the most fundamental quality that sort of acts as the foundation for all the other personality qualities that we have, it's like the first one, the seed form of that, that the seed was established through a process that was based on fear of survival, or fear of not surviving, basically, or fear of being able to go through this life in an effective manner, or not being able to go through it in an effective manner. That there was some fear connected to or associated with that process. So when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing that the process is basically natural. It's quite natural to have some kind of basic fundamental feel for who you are as the foundation around which all the other facets and aspects of personality gather and take shape. And it reminds me very much of a sacred geometrical form. You know, we've all seen these lovely, and I probably won't take time to put one up on my screen because you can Google them, but the sacred geometry often starts, and one of our participants sent me this beautiful video on sacred geometry recently, which, by the way, I enjoyed immensely. I guess I told you that, but it starts with I love it. My necklace creates three. Oh my God, how perfect. So it starts with a single circle like this, and then it divides to three circles. So you can imagine, because this is like my necklace is dividing it, right? But there's a circle built around each quadrant of the three like that. And then that's the beginnings of, and then you can build out and build out and build out layers of circles, all the same size, or you can do a circle here with the three around it, and then you can do a big circle that includes the one in the center and the three around it, and it builds out like that. But they're all multiples of each other, essentially. Download coming in. It's very nice to tie in like little bits of eternal truth from all that. We have eternal truth coming in from lots of different locations and angles, and very beautiful that the tie-in with the eternal truth of the sacred geometry just naturally opens the door to bring in some more information. Remember yesterday, for those of you who were here, I was talking about how the first division of wholeness into the parts is a threefold division. But I said, but we need to explore a twofold division. And I was thinking last night, I know there's this twofold division, but how do we get two from three? This circle with its little three similar sized circles that go with it give rise to another circle that's exactly double, right? This one goes to this one, and it creates a doubling, which is a twofold division rather than a threefold division. So that was one of my questions that just got answered. Thank you, everybody. And of course, the first seed, and this ties in perfectly with sacred geometry, because the first form of sacred geometry is the one with the three, the one in the middle and then the three around it, and it's called the seed of life. And yesterday, as we were talking in the twofold division, that one aspect of the twofold division is the aspect of masculinity, which is the spark of life. It is the seed that is the initiator of the manifestation of creation. And it is the female form that carries the initiation through and actually births the creation. And so the seed of life is here. is the one little one with the three little ones around it. And then the female goes, oh, I could make this, I could just double it. I'll just make that whole thing into one big wholeness. And by making it into one big wholeness, we've then basically like created an octave. In music, it's the octave, right? That it's really the same note. It's just the same note. She takes the seed form and she says, well, I'll just make the same note, but I'm just going to make it up a notch. We'll just take it up one notch like that. And then of course that process of creating the seed and then taking it up a notch and then the seed and taking it up a notch gives rise to multiple folds of consciousness into its own nature that gives rise to the manifestation of creation. It ties together so beautifully. That was the download, by the way. And when the download comes in, you guys, I'll say, oh, a download coming in. It means that our collective healing group is sufficiently receptive and aligned with nature's intelligence that everybody receives that download as a structure of consciousness folding in on its own nature within the system of the self. So it's received viscerally, you could say. And then I unpack it. That's my job. That's why I'm sitting behind the microphone here. Oh my gosh. But you guys are the brilliant ones. You are the brilliant ones who are bringing that, shining your light and allowing that to come forth. So thank you. I'm so grateful. Anyway, back to the crystallization of the egoic fixation point. To get back there, come around full circle. And that the crystal, when he says crystallization, he means that moment when the little child says, oh, this is going to be my center. This is going to be the quality of me. That's my home base. That's like where I return back to. That's the foundation of all the other personality characteristics that I'm going to kind of gather around me during my life. And his point was that there's fear associated with that and a feeling of like dire need, because it's a survival process of, we have to have these skill sets. We have to have these particular strengths in order to navigate through the material field of creation and the material world. And particularly, how do we navigate that critical point? If we're looking at our map here, that critical point where the impulse to create life has burst forth, that spark of life, and then it's multiplied up on itself until it reaches its full expression. And then at that point, the whole thing has to engage with the source of creation in such a way that an evolutionary effect occurs. And when at that point that shift takes place, that, oh, something has been created and now it has to become an instrument for evolution, that at the point where that shift occurs, where it becomes the instrument for evolution, it can be bumpy. It can be bumpy and anything could come out. Anything could emerge at that point, which is what makes the whole process really interesting for the source of creation and not always comfortable for us. That's that point. That's that point where nature's going, I'm going this way. And you're just like, oh, right. So. I'm feeling in the heart center, opening up that compassion that's necessary and required. And that's exactly the experience, what I just described there is exactly the experience that the little child has at the time that they realize, oh, dang, I've got to settle in here. I have to find my feet. I have to stabilize. Basically, the thought is I have to stabilize myself somehow so that the winds of change that I am exposed to in this human existence don't just blow me all over creation. And one of the things that I'm seeing is that the little child nervous system isn't fully ripened or developed. And what's happening at those early ages, at that early age, like 3, 4, 5, around that age, is neural exuberance, which is the creation, well, language is developing and evolving, but it's also the nervous system is at a period of its lifespan where it is creating massive amounts of neural connections by the second. By the second, lots and lots of neural connections are being created. And it's just like it reminds me of like the sound of white noise, like a kind of sizzling. It's like a kind of sizzling of neural expression occurs within the nervous system, but there's not a lot of padding. The padding doesn't start we don't start padding and sort of making the nervous system a little more comfortable until about age 7. That's when the myelination and the pruning of the nervous system begins. But before that, there's a kind of vulnerability in the system, in the physiology, and also in the psychology and the more delicate levels of oneself. Children are vulnerable. That's why they need parents to protect them. And that's why they don't just need parents to protect them. They need their adult self to protect them. And that's why we're doing this healing. As adult selves, our awareness goes back to the little child self at the time of maximum vulnerability, at the time when the realization of I have to stabilize myself somehow so that I can navigate this human existence with all of its ups and downs and all of its purification and integration and unknowns. So much the little child, so much is like a constant state of awe. Little child self experiences awe and amazement as sort of part of the ongoing experience. And what I'm seeing our adult self bringing to the little child self at that critical moment, at that significant moment when the child went, oh, I have to stabilize in. I have to pick one of my variety of personality traits and make that my home base. Bringing in truth, bringing in one thing that's happening is I see the astral body shifting a little bit, because once that central point of reference has been created at the causal level of the physiology in the little child, it is connected. It's connected into everything. It connects into, from that point forward, the astral body kicks into gear, and all this structure of, I had a dream about this moment. I already worked through this. All the astral structure begins to form around, like a sacred geometrical form, around that particular point, that fixation point. Everybody's receiving the gift. It's a gift of transcending the boundaries and limitations created and produced by this structure without losing the structure. It's a very important thing to do, because we need to be able to know ourselves. Ultimately, the whole principle behind the energy healing is that the sense of self, ego, expands to understand itself in terms of a larger wholeness. That's this thing, right? This thing, whoop, next larger wholeness. But as that's happening, there's a mechanic in that. There's a mechanic that allows it to go from a circle this big to a circle this big to the next node up, to the next resonance up. Is that each time consciousness expands and the sense of self expands, it identifies the sense of who we are, identifies with a larger portion of reality, we become vulnerable again. It's kind of like a rebirth. It's like starting over again. And in that process, we come back to a state, a place of awe. And we are open at that point to accessing deeper levels of our own karma that we've created for ourselves. So it's really, really common for people to have the experience of their awareness expands and they really open up and they feel like, oh my gosh, I can tell I'm like at a whole new level. And then some karma hits just like that. Because when the consciousness, oh, right? So some people have had this experience. Because when the consciousness gets bigger, the older karmas, the ones that are like further away from you, they become accessible. It's like your consciousness expands and you bump into them. And only because nature structures it that way, our nature, our own nature, which is folding in on itself, structures it that way because we don't want to have to deal with some kind of intense karmas when we don't have the resources to deal with it, right? So this healing for the fixation point, the whole principle of the fixation point is that it's kind of a coping mechanism. It's using a particular strength that we came into this lifetime with as sort of the central core of our nature that will allow us to navigate through our human existence. And as the sense of self is sort of like anchored to the center of that space. So I was saying last night that for me, one of the fundamental values of that central space is compassion. And I use that in my work all the time. And I realize that looking through my own filter, it looks to me as if all healing is affected through the process of compassion, right? That's what I've always been saying. But then one is able to step out a little bit out and see, oh, well, that's because I was looking through my filter. And of course it works. It's a model that works, right? Because also the mother of creation has this aspect of compassion, which is, oh, there's so many places I could go with that, dang. But one of the places is that if the male energy is the spark that opens up into the, by the way, yesterday's video had like this long section on gender, just throwing that out. Gender identity. I get to put in my 2 cents into that collective discussion. Thank you very much. But the male energy is that spark that begins the process. It's the seed. And then the female energy is the one that manipulates the seed and brings it out more and more to its manifest form. Well, that process is best affected through the finer aspects of the nervous system. And it's not, as I said yesterday, it's not that men are only one thing and women are only one thing, because we all possess the entire range of the creative process and of the manifesting process and so forth. But my point is that the female energy is associated with the formation and the birthing of expression, because the female aspects of creation are intimately, inherently connected to compassion. More on that in yesterday's video. Anybody who's here today and didn't see yesterday's video, you will get the recording, so you can check that out. It has to be colored with an immense amount of compassion, because the potential for suffering is so great. And that even with an immense amount of compassion, still suffering is so great. Still, there's a lot of people suffering horribly. So you could imagine if that process was being orchestrated from a level of crudeness or dispassionate uncaring for people or for the value of experience that people have, like how it would be just, we would devolve into a kind of self-destructive cycle. And it's not that men are dispassionate, right? It's that the male energy is specifically to promote that that sudden expansion, that boom kind of energy. And then the female is more the steady. Okay, the boom comes out, and then she's like, oh, I can do something with it. I can do this. I can take this. I can move with it. I can transform. It can evolve. It can evolve like that. And so she brings it back around, only to bring it back to the source of creation, where that male energy is there to boom to the next one like that. Such an interesting structure. Anyway, okay. So have we exploited this healing for the fixation point? Just double checking on that. To summarize that healing, the self and the present, the God presence through each of us goes back in time and locates that moment when the child realized, oh, I have to kind of like settle into a particular aspect of myself, and provided a level of truth to the child's self so that the child understands that it's not so much a matter of dire need or emergency like a fear, but more on the level of this is natural and it happens anyway. It's going to happen anyway. Maybe different of us have different experiences of that moment. Some people might have come at that moment in a state of emergency, or, you know, under conditions of abuse or something like that. But others may have come at it more gently. In any event, the principle is that it is a natural process, and it is absolutely a good evolutionary process. It is a process of having the personality characteristics like little pieces, right? And then realizing, oh, it can become a wholeness. This one central value of myself can become very stable, and in so doing, like a table with 3 legs, it can become very stable. And in so doing, it can actually start to fulfill a really important role in the construction of my inner landscape.